founded in 1877 by a gentleman called Ed Shefflin, and this Ed fellow apparently had a great sense of humor, because when he left all of his friends and family back east, they told him, Ed, all you're going to find in Arizona is your grave. But he didn't. He discovered silver, a mine that eventually yielded millions of dollars in profits, making him literally overnight a wealthy man. So Ed decided to spite all of those relatives back home, and he called that mine and the town that sprang up around it Tombstone. And the miners apparently liked the name. It was, after all, pretty appropriate for a town with as many casualties as this little spot. Then in 1889, the mines that had been flourishing for 20 years suddenly went dry, or that is to say, they actually went wet. The miners hit an underground water source and completely flooded everything out. So they packed their bags and moved to Bisbee, about 30 miles up the road, where copper had just been discovered. And in the meantime, the population of Tombstone steadily dwindled until in the 1900s there was only 30 people in town limits. At that point in time, Tombstone officially hit the registers of Arizona ghost towns. And many paranormal investigators, as well as many people on the tours in the times past, now believe that that is quite true. You know, that movie they made in, what was it, 95 or 2000, Gunfight at the OK Corral, of course. If it wasn't for that event, Tombstone wouldn't have a reason to exist. However, because of that, they made, I think, a total of 80 movies in the last 120 years. Ever since they had moving pictures, they've been making movies about this story. And then in the 1960s, a group that called themselves Historic Tombstone Adventures moved into town. So they renovated all the old structures and built the town back up from the ground, and it was no longer a ghost town from those days on. And today it is the flourishing tourist community you see now. Stop rolling your eyes. Okay, then you know what this is. This is the EMF detector, or an electromagnetic field detector. It basically measures the electromagnetic force surrounding our bodies. Now, for those of you who are smiling at me knowingly, an EMF is emitted by any living being. That includes trees. So this might go off in crazy places, and I would like a volunteer to be my paranormal investigator for the evening. You already said you were going to get spooked, so if you do want it later on in the evening, though, there's one spot where you can
If I get you scared, I'll give it to her. My courage isn't up to it.
Enthusiastic, 2 thumbs up. You should pull a roper. For some reason, the spirit, it is strong enough. And it's probably because it's more concentrated. My natural EMF is broadly dispersed. It's not all right here with me. The spirit is all in one area. Oh. The Earps came marching down the street in this direction with Doc Holliday staggering drunkenly at their side. Now there's a reason, by the way, that Doc was always drunk. It's because he was dying from a terminal illness that was extraordinarily painful, and in those days they didn't have ibuprofen and Aleve, so he drank to manage the pain. The cowboys were hidden behind trees, buildings, rocks, horses, each other, anything they could hide behind, in this area, scattered out across both sides of the street. Now, in the course of that gunfight, 3 men were killed. Tom and Frank McLaury, who were brothers, and their friend, Billy Clanton. Now, Tom, of all the cowboys, was probably the only one that could be considered a real gentleman. He was about 30 years old, he had a mustache, he was a really nice-looking fellow, he kept himself up, and he was liked by all the women in town for being so mannerly. He was also liked a little bit too much by one woman in particular, Wyatt Earp's niece, Patty. We are now at the back of C.S. Fly's photo studio, where those infamous pictures of Miss Josie Marcus were reportedly taken. Josephine Marcus was a beautiful young actress who moved into Tombstone in the late 1870s. Now, back in the 1870s and 80s, Tombstone was still the mining community, and so there were 10,000 plus single men in town. So you can imagine what happened when a non-prostitute moves to town. Everyone falls in love with her instantly. Now, Josie, unfortunately, was young and inexperienced and chose the worst possible candidate to be her boyfriend. She chose Sheriff Behan. Usually they just catch a glimpse of Toby out of the corner of their eyes. He also likes to fly along the walls and knock clothing off. Toby, you see, is not a normal 8 to 10-year-old boy. He's dead. And he was first encountered by the owner of this building a couple of years ago. And that's when she was also given the name Toby and told how old he was. Presumably not by him, by another spirit that's in this building. Toby's not really what we're here to see. We're here for this tree. This tree is now your experiment for the evening. The first time we had the EMF detector, there was a 10-year-old boy, 10 or 11 years old, and he was enthusiastically investigating everything in sight. From the ground, rocks, everyone on the tour. When we finally got down here, it was the first time that evening the EMF detector went wild. Never gone off at the Birdcage Theater. However, 2 weeks ago on the tour, there were 2 women standing underneath the sign, and they smelled garlic and felt what they described as heaviness fall on them. And they stepped aside and they kept smelling the garlic until they walked completely away from the sign. Now, did anyone enjoy the tour even just a little bit?